Hey guys, it's Megan from Fireside Farms, and we are finally getting back in the garden today. Today we are doing some transplanting of my spring crops, and we will also be conducting an experiment with them. Now back in January, we started these spring seedlings indoors together, and about, 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, these are gonna be going in the garden. So what I mean by spring seedlings is that all of these crops can withstand a frost. So I don't have to wait until April, when our last frost is, to plant these out, and I can get a head start and get a harvest sooner planting them out now. Here in Southwest New Mexico, my last frost comes about April 1st-ish is the average. Last year it came on April 12th, I believe. But nonetheless, these plants going out now at the end of February will give me a better chance of getting a harvest from them before it gets really, really hot really quickly in the spring. So the 5 different types of crops I'm gonna be planting out are rutabaga, cabbage, yarrow, calendula, and dill. And as I said before, all of these plants are frost hardy, so they should be able to withstand the cooler temperatures that we do get at night. The cabbage and rutabaga also prefer cooler temperatures, and because it gets in the 90s in April for us, giving these a chance to mature during the cooler temperatures in March and April just ensures that I'll probably get something before they just croak because of the heat in the summer. So the little soil experiment that I'll be doing today is planting these crops out in 3 different types of soil that I have in my garden. The first place I'll be planting them is in raised beds, where I have good established, at least by one season, established soil that came from bags and compost and is generally pretty rich compared to the other 2. The second place I'll be planting is in my in-ground garden bed, but the one that's about a year old. So last year I cultivated and created an in-ground garden bed, added compost, plants grew in the fall, well actually all through the spring, fall, and winter seasons, so that soil has been enriched by organic matter, plant roots, worms, and soil microbes. And the third place I'll be planting is in my newly developed in-ground garden bed that was just done a few weeks ago. So on my property, I have really sandy alkaline soil, and that's why I started this garden with raised garden beds, because I have very poor soil. But last year I decided to try my hand at an in-ground garden bed, knowing that it would take several years to build up these garden rows to a properly nutritious soil. So what I wanted to do this year was test my progress of how I've developed the soil in the first part of the in-ground garden bed compared to the richness of my raised beds and the utter poor quality of my brand new in-ground beds. So any added amendments this year have been added to all 3 vegetable locations. I sifted out some of my homemade compost and put it over the top, and then I will be adding the same type of fertilizer to all 3 locations in the garden. So technically no plant should have an upper hand over the other, except for the fact that the soil they're grown in is going to be radically different. This is just a fun experiment to see how the plants grow differently in each kind of soil, just because I'm curious and I've never actually done this. And also I think it's going to be really beneficial to know how much better my raised bed soil is versus my brand new sandy, barely amended in-ground soil. Maybe they'll both be awesome. Who knows? But we're gonna find out. So let's go. So we're out in the garden where we have the 3 locations that I'm gonna be doing my soil experiment. The first is this raised bed, which has been established for a little over a year now and has had plants growing in it for all 4 seasons of the year. The second is my in-ground garden bed, which has also been established for about a year and has had plants growing in it, but it is definitely not really good raised bed soil, but it's a mix of sand, homegrown compost, and organic matter that has built up and been composted down over this past year. And the last location is my newly cultivated in-ground garden bed, which is basically just sand and a little bit of store-bought compost that I mixed in. And then of course the homegrown compost that I amended all 3 of these locations with has been laid over the top. You can definitely feel the difference in the tilth of the soil between all 3 beds. So I'm very excited to see how this experiment turns out. But let's get to planting, and I'll let you know what I'm going to be amending the actual plants when I put them into the beds with. So I will be planting all of these beds with 1 rutabaga, 1 cabbage, and 1 yarrow. The calendula and dill are optional. I'm going to be planting all of these plants out today regardless, but for the experiment itself, just a cabbage, rutabaga, and a yarrow, because the spots that I made the experiment for are pretty small, and I don't want to stuff these plants together in a way that they can't grow to their fullest potential. The amendments I'll be using today are going to be organic bone meal for a source of phosphorus, and these worm castings, which I'm also going to drop in the planting hole. I would normally fertilize with an all-purpose fertilizer, but I'm out right now and I still have yet to go to the store. So when I get a chance to buy an all-purpose fertilizer, I will, an organic one, and top dress every planting location with that fertilizer, just so it's all equal. But I do not always just use bone meal and worm castings. I need an all-purpose fertilizer. I just also need to go to the store. So I begin by deciding where I'm going to place my plants in this small space so that they have the most room available. The yarrow, I know, is a perennial and will not die back after harvesting. In fact, it will probably last for years in this garden bed. So I decided to put it in the corner where, as it grows, it could sprawl over the side of the bed and not impede any other plants that I've put in here, especially the summer crops I transplant in April. It's very important to be aware of your planting locations for the spring, because these crops will not be done growing by the time we plant out the tomatoes and peppers. And I do not want a bunch of garden bed space taken with spring crops that aren't going to last all summer like the tomatoes and peppers will. I dig my hole just wide enough for the size of the soil in the pot, and then I'm going to place my amendments. So the worm casting and the bone meal goes in the bottom of the hole. And I do like to loosen up the bottom of these plants to get the roots spread out and keep them from going in a circle. These plants aren't too bad though. They are not very grown out and are not root bound. Ideally, you want to be transplanting your plants during the least stressful time of day, which would be either dawn or dusk. It's still pretty cool. Obviously, we're still in the winter here, and the sun isn't that harsh. I think the high today is probably going to be in the 60s. So, and there's no wind, which is great for spring planting here in my area. So I'm just doing these at about 10 a.m. and it's not going to hurt the plants at all. If it were in the middle of the summer or the middle of the winter, you might want to take that into account on your planting times. And whenever it's the least stressful to be outside for you is probably going to be the best for the plants as well. Here in this older in-ground bed, the plants you see next to me are actually broccoli plants that overwintered, and they've been doing great and producing broccoli for me most of the winter. So I'm fairly confident that these transplants will do well in this bed. The only thing I'm concerned about is the watering issue. I still have not found a really good way to water these raised rows. Because my soil is slightly hydrophobic since it's so dry, and I just have trouble getting the water to sink in. But we are going to be adding a drip system this year, which I think will greatly benefit this in-ground garden bed. And here is the newly tilled in-ground row, which I do not have a whole lot of confidence in. This dirt really isn't the best quality for growing super healthy, luscious vegetable plants, but we're gonna give it a go. Add plenty of fertilizer as long as the wallet allows it. But I'm so excited to try this experiment and really see the difference in the 3 types of soil that I have here on this property. So with all these planted out, I am definitely expecting the raised bed to do the best and the new in-ground garden bed to do the worst. But we will see. The yarrow also will probably do better than the cabbage and the rutabaga because it is a perennial. So they are a bit hardier. They're a bit more heat tolerant and a bit more drought tolerant. Though I have never successfully planted yarrow in my in-ground garden. So this whole thing is going to be an experiment that we get to follow along with. And it's a nice way to see how good your soil is without spending a couple $100 on a soil test. Now, one thing that might decimate this whole plan is if we get a really hard freeze in the next month before the last frost. It's not unheard of, although we have been warmer the past couple days, it's still touching freezing at night. And I know these plants can handle it because I have hardened them off during freezing weather and they're still alive. But last year we did get a pretty hard freeze in the teens in late March. So that might knock these plants back. It might, you know, kill them all and ruin the whole experiment. But that's also the purpose of this, is every year you just get a little bit better at predicting your weather, getting to know your garden and soil. And if these plants were to make it through some really bad weather or some really bad soil, that also helps you as a gardener, because then you can let that plant go to seed, save those seeds, and begin cultivating a variety of plant that just works well here at your place. So there are multiple reasons for experimenting and just, you know, trying stuff in your garden. The only thing I'm losing is a couple of dollars if all of these plants die for the packet of seeds that it cost. But I'm gaining so much knowledge and experience that it's absolutely worth it. So I hope I've inspired you guys to experiment in your garden. And if you want to keep up with this, it'll probably be on vlogs or garden tours. So hit the like and subscribe and stay tuned to this channel. Thanks, guys.